covers all of my information. So, Kathleen, I'm going to pass this on to you.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining us. As Carol said, this is first time that we've done something regarding digital assets, and it's becoming a little bit more of a focus, both from the perspective of the law firm and from a company that actually our lovely Carol has started called Full Circle Legacy that really helps administrators of estates be able to handle all of the different aspects of both estate or trust administration. And as we really started to delve into this whole issue of digital assets, it was really eye-opening to us and regarding how many types of digital assets are out there and how much we're really utilizing our digital life and probably don't even recognize the fact that these are potential assets, things that may need to be preserved or somehow accessed upon our death. So why don't I go ahead and start and just kind of talk about what what is digital assets and what really are we talking about when we're talking about this type of asset holdings. Most of us know bank accounts. Certainly, that's something is tangible, real estate that we might own, retirement plans, those kinds of things without question. But our digital lives are becoming more and more complicated. And recent studies showed that most of us have probably around an average of 80 plus online accounts in one way or the other. Now, remember, every time that you sign up with a store, you have an Instagram, you have Facebook, you may have, an X account, all of these kinds of things that might be out there. Your Google accounts, places where you store your information. So we touch our digital lives daily, and it's in many different forms. And we utilize these accounts in multiple different ways. For most of us, it's places where we may save things, or we have a shopping account with someone. They may have our credit card on file, a place where we go on and we purchase something like Amazon, and we keep our credit card on file with them. We have access to things like, Netflix and all of the other streaming services that, again, are oftentimes, attached to a credit card that we may have. So really getting an understanding of the full scope of what we have in digital assets is one of the first steps that we'll talk about here. And one of the things to ask yourself is that if something happened to you tomorrow, would your loved ones be able to access your phone? Would they be able to access your accounts? So many of us, we were talking the other day, particularly with iPhone, or even with an Android, being able to we put passwords on those, or you have to use face recognition to be able to get into them. And how much do we rely on those phones for not only contact information, but to be able to do things like two-factor authentication to be able to get into other accounts? So it's really important that you begin by looking at, what does it mean to have a digital life? And what access to things do I, as I start to look at all of the different things that I may use, how are these things protected? And do I want to make sure that someone has access to this so that if something happened to me, they could get at it? So a few things that we're going to talk about today is, again, what is really digital? What are digital assets? What is a digital life, and what's involved in that? Learning about that, really it's a much trickier situation when we're dealing with digital assets than when we're dealing with other types of inheritance. A bank account, those have been around for, centuries at this point. And those are things that people can, we have processes to access, being able to have legal authority in place to be able to get at someone's bank account and be able to get it distributed as the decedent has asked for it to be done. But digital assets are very different. And it's, again, it's understanding what are those digital assets, and then the processes that we're going to talk about are varied across the board. And there's no one and done solution to how to manage digital assets. But we are going to talk about some actual steps that you can take to help start getting your digital life in kind of control, and to be able to start understanding, what does it mean to be able to give access to your digital assets either now or after your death. And we'll talk a little bit about somehow the bigger organizations like Apple and Facebook, and ways that you can think about getting things in order now to make it easier on people in the future. So let's really talk about the breakdown of your digital life. First of all, a lot of people think in terms of, okay, financial assets. If you are into it all, cryptocurrency, online access for things like Coinbase wallets, a group called Robinhood, there's Robinhood accounts, even online banking. Most of us these days have started to switch over to some source of online banking. Maybe we don't get our statements anymore in the mail. Maybe we only get them digitally provided to us. Certainly the ability to transfer money between accounts, to access your banking so that you can see what you have in your accounts, where your money is and what the value of that is. These are things that all of us are doing on a regular basis. And if we weren't here, what happens to that access, and how do we make sure, if we want to, that our beneficiaries, that our loved ones can access those accounts quickly? Then there's your personal stuff. I mean, I don't know about you, but my iPhone is blows up with the amount of photos that I now have on it. I have 2 grandchildren now, and you can imagine they take up, all of the space on my lovely iPhone. I've had to buy more iCloud space. But what happens to me? What happens if my family can't get into my iPhone? They can't get into my iCloud storage, or maybe my Google data storage, things like your Gmail, etc. My father-in-law has done a tremendous amount of work with a program about ancestry, and he's started to really amass a whole collection of information and pictures and data regarding family history. How does anybody else get into that? It would be a terrible waste to have that data just go away upon his death. For people who have businesses, something more to think about, if your Instagram account actually makes money for you, or you have an Etsy shop or some other type of web based business, what happens if you're not here to be able to access that information? Does that have value? Is that something that we should be concerned about in terms of being able to somehow pass on to your beneficiaries? And then, of course, there's the subscription services like Netflix and Spotify, et cetera. These things automatically oftentimes hit your credit card monthly. And after your death, if somebody doesn't know about those different subscription services, there's going to be a fair amount of bills being racked up against your credit card to pay for services that you're no longer using. And so, how does someone know that you have them, number one? And how do they access those different services to be able to shut them down? So, what are we talking about when we're talking about your footprint and in terms of what your digital life is? Now, again, value of these things is dependent. Photographs may not have a value in a monetary sense,
This
but
meeting is being recorded.
they certainly would have value to those who want to have copies of those photos. They want to make sure that they have all of those priceless family heirlooms. I laugh a little bit. We still have in my house these large plastic boxes of the photos from when I was a kid. Well, none of that exists anymore. My children, their lives are all online, they're all in a digital space somewhere. And so, how do we make sure that we can pass that on? Again, talking about the whole bill service, if you've got online bill services paid or set up, your bank account's automatically paying your credit card. After death, if your bank freezes your bank account, how do you make sure things like your credit cards are being taken care of? Those final bills are being addressed so that you're not racking up additional charges. There's no racking up of, late fees, that kind of thing, or that money's not being pulled from your accounts for services that you're no longer using. And then there can be some things that have actual value, things like domain names. If you have a popular domain name for a business, or that you're sitting on, that could be something that could be sold and actually be turned into some kind of monetary value. Loyalty programs, things like points, are those things that are transferable to others? How do we make sure that your loved one knows that they exist and that they're able to understand how to transfer those things? And for the younger generation, or I say that with tongue in cheek, because many people are into gaming, and those kinds of things can actually have value again. Games that people play on a regular basis, they may be actually racking up value in terms of cash or in terms of points, this kind of thing. And so, how do you make sure that those things are identified and passed on if it is something that you want to make sure is preserved? So let's talk about some of the complications first, because this is a very complicated space and it's one that's constantly changing as these companies are starting to recognize the need to be able to access accounts and the want to be able to, and balancing that with security. I'm sure all of you know that scammers have become more and more active these days, and it is extremely difficult to make sure that your all of your digital life is protected to the level you may want it to be. We hear about data breaches all the time and people's information being out there on the dark web somewhere. I think I've heard that, more than 90% of all of our information at this point, including social security numbers, et cetera, have been somehow extracted and are out there on the dark web. So, how do we try to balance this protecting ourselves, but also making sure that people have access to information if they need to? So, one of the biggest things that many of us use is a two-factor authentication. And if you don't use it, I would highly recommend that you consider using it. And this is where, if you go to access, let's say, your Facebook account and you're in a new place, you're not on your normal kind of Wi-Fi system, then this system would kick back an authentication request to say, is this you? Are you actually the one who's been looking to get into this? So that we're trying to protect it from someone doing improper things with our accounts. Same thing with bank accounts. You're going onto your bank account, they send you back a code, and you have to enter that code in. So it's a great way of being able to protect ourselves, but what happens after your death? Someone can't get into your iPhone because your iPhone is locked, not your face. You don't know the code as the person who's now trying to manage things, and you can't do the two-factor authentication. One of our clients actually, as a tip, had said to us, "Hey, you may want to remind people, don't shut down their deceased loved one's phone too quickly because they may need it for a while in order to be able to do these two-factor authentications and be able to get accounts clear." So it's a great thing on one hand for protection, but it becomes a barrier for us. Password managers are another one. So how many of us have, I think, again, there's a statistic out there like 80% of us use one password for everything and maybe add a number to it or an exclamation point to it. There's a wonderful comedian from the UK, and I apologize. His first name is Michael. I cannot remember his last name, but he does a skit about this whole thing about how every time you update your password, you're just adding a little character to the password that you had originally used. But passwords are becoming more and more of a problem. We need passwords for almost everything that we're doing online these days. And the ability to be able to remember those passwords and vary those passwords for that protection purposes is becoming more and more difficult. There are some programs that one can use that would help kind of manage overall passwords. One's LastPass, there's several out there, but even with those, you have to have a master password to get in. And where do you keep that master password? We all get worried about what we're writing down, that kind of thing, that it somehow could be obtained by someone we don't want to have get it. So great that we have these programs to be able to use, but we also have to think about what if we do need somebody else to be able to access it. And again, everything's encrypted these days. Everything has got super security or should have super security around it to ensure that there isn't a bad actor trying to get in, but it can become a barrier for us as well. Another complication that we have is on the legal side of things. what does someone need in terms of authentication to be able to say, I have the authority to deal with this person's estate? Every state is different. So, how Massachusetts handles the probate estate is very different than other states in the country. And so, depending on where your loved one died, having access can be can actually have a complication to it if you have to get specific approval from a state in order to be able to access that particular asset. And companies, again, are really paranoid about privacy laws. Sometimes they don't even aren't even willing to say, yes, this person has an account. I had someone whose loved one passed away, and they were calling, believe it or not, EverSource, and they're talking to EverSource about trying to get the electric service canceled on this person's house, and they couldn't do it. They were giving them all kinds of trouble because they weren't the account holder. Well, the account holder had died. So again, companies are trying to be careful. They don't want anybody just being able to shut off someone's service, but we have to balance that. We have to look as a society and finding out a way, how do we also make it so that we can get these things taken care of when it is appropriate to do so? And I put in international accounts and kind of a little tongue in cheek about good luck with that, but this is something that people do need to think about. If you have international accounts, we have many clients who have accounts, let's say, in Canada. That country will handle their accounts very differently than we handle here in the US. They may not accept US documents if they choose not to, with respect to authority, like a power of attorney, even a probate of an estate here in Massachusetts or in any state in the US may not be acceptable in that other country, or you may find that you're going through many different hoops to be able to get that accepted in the other country. A will here in the States may not be acceptable, as well as a trust in another country. So, if you hold assets internationally, you really need to make sure that you are speaking with those account holders to determine what is the process in that other country. Should you, upon your death, want that to go to specific places, you want to make sure that it's going to your beneficiaries. So, a very big thing to make sure that you're taking care of if you have international accounts. And the clock can be ticking on some of these things. Some of the bigger companies, Facebook, Instagram, et cetera, if they find that there's no activity on an account, they have a process for beginning to eventually inactivate them, freeze them, and or delete them. And again, how many of us, particularly on something like a Facebook account, have photos that may want to be accessed by others? The subscription accounts are going to keep on charging that credit card even after you've died until they get notice of your death and a way to be able to close down those accounts. And if you're using things like cryptocurrency, they're not going to wait to have access to the account. The value is going to continue to go up and down, up and down, and up and down. And accounts could lose money over a period of time if they're not timely accessed. So let's talk about what you can do with respect to actually putting a plan in place. And at some point, I'm going to ask Carol, please feel free to jump in, as Carol has been doing, again, a lot of work with Full Circle Legacy to make sure that we have this information, to be able to help administrators of an estate be able to do their job. So, one of the things we can do from a legal standpoint is really take a look at our powers of attorney and make sure that there is language in them to allow for the access to digital assets. Now, that's not foolproof. Excuse me. Financial institutions, these companies may have their own requirements above and beyond something like a power of attorney. They may even choose not to accept powers of attorney. When we're dealing with the federal government, for instance, things like Social Security, they have their own power of attorney. They do not accept the power of attorney that's written by your lawyer. Making sure there's language in a will or a trust. If you have specific digital assets, we may need to make sure that they are addressed very specifically in order to make sure whoever you want to have access to them or whoever you want those to go to is clearly outlined with respect to your legal documents. Some of the things that you can do. for yourself ahead of time is start to make a list of what you have. Really sit down and take a look and say, what does my digital life look like? Do I have an Instagram account? Do I have a Facebook account? Am I on an X platform? Do I have cryptocurrency, etc.? Really start to look where you have um, continually used a digital footprint. Do you have access to your bank accounts online? Do you use a shopping forum like Amazon or maybe, Best Buy or someone else on a regular basis that you have a credit card attached to? You want to make sure you're identifying these things so that, again, if something happens to you, the people who are going to be managing your estate know where to start with all of this.
Well, and if I may interject
Absolutely.
too, if you don't have these things written down, the people that are helping you out or doing these things after you are gone, they won't even know to look for it. So you could have some valuable things out there, like a cryptocurrency. And if you never documented it, then they won't even know to begin to look for it.
Right.
So making a list is very important, whether it's digital or tangible.
Right. Exactly. And making sure that you, again, as you begin to go online, a lot of times we forget what we do access on a regular basis, but you start to think about it every time you're accessing something. Think about whether this is something that you want to make sure people know the account exists.
Mhm.
Start thinking about utilizing a password manager. And again, I'm not, in the business of recommending any particular one, but there are a lot of good options out there. And they allow you to then just use one master password and be able to then maintain all the other passwords that you may have. The other thing I found about password managers that I really like is that they oftentimes will create a new password for you when you're going on a site so that you get a unique password every time you're accessing different sites. So your one password isn't universally used across all of your digital life. It's the one password to get in it, but then there's different passwords for the different sites. But again, and we'll talk about this afterwards, you have to think about who are you sharing your master password with and how are you sharing that?
Mhm.
There's also ways now to pick someone to be your digital executor. Believe it or not, that's a real thing. And this is where you're choosing with these companies somebody who you are appointing to be the person to manage that site, that aspect of your digital life, should something happen to you, giving them access and being able to make certain decisions. Each site is different. They have some limits oftentimes on the things your digital executor can do, but at the very least, they may be able to, like with Facebook, make your page memorialized so that nobody can begin posting or taking anything from it. Um, or they may be able to go in and actually download certain information, like copies of photos, etc., before a decision is made to no longer to delete that from your digital footprint. And some things to think about, we write down everything everywhere, excuse me, write down where everything is really important. But again, this is a balancing act. My father-in-law lives at a community. He lives at an assisted living community, and it's a wonderful community. But people have access to his apartment because they come in to do repairs, they come in to provide care, they come in to do things like housekeeping services. And while we want to have complete trust in everyone, being able to get information these days is very easy. All someone needs is a phone and a camera on their phone, and they can just take a snapshot of someone's page of passwords, etc. So where you store this information is going to be critical, and making sure that the people who you want to have access to it have it. Like maybe there's a box with a key, a lock and key, that you've given a copy of that key to your important people so they can access the box if they need to. Those sticky notes, I can't tell you when I walked in his apartment the first time and he had the sticky notes all over his computer with his passwords, I thought, oh my gosh. And it just because he couldn't remember them all. And it was one, one more way of being able to make it easy on him and easy on anybody else who wanted to get at his passwords and be able to do something that might be nefarious. You do want to make sure that this information that you keep is updated regularly. So we change our digital life all the time. We may add a Spotify or a Pandora subscription, or maybe we have audio books or whatever, and we're changing that. Maybe we, decide to cancel something. We want to make sure we're keeping the information up to date as much as possible. And you want to leave clear instructions that any Tom, Dick, or Harry, we don't know the ability of your executor, your person that you've asked to be in these important positions to manage things, what their ability is to be able to actually get into that account. So be clear about how to access account if there might be something different about it, like it needs two-factor authentication. Make sure that they know that so that they are aware of how to be able to get into that account. Carol, I don't know if you want to jump in and talk a little bit about our lovely tech giants and some of the ways that
Yeah,
they've been addressing these issues.
sure. Well, the tech giants are reserve the right to change anything. So as soon as I say this is how you do it, they're going to say, nope, we changed our policy. So here's the basic outline of what they're going to do. So Apple has a legacy contact, as Kathleen was mentioning. There's digital executors that you can set up in your accounts, and unfortunately, it's not like just having a digital will where you name one person and that person can access everything. Most of the companies you have to individually put in a name. For Apple, you put in a legacy contact. And I'm going to, once I get through this, I have a document that I created for you to hand out um, on how to go about going into Facebook and Apple and doing these things. So I have instructions for you on how to set up a legacy contact in Apple. So anyone who is your legacy contact in Apple can get into your Apple account. They can download your photos. They can access your Apple Pay account. So they would be the person that would close everything for you, download all the photos and videos of Kathleen's beautiful grandchildren, and they would be the ones that can collect all that information. Google has an inactive account manager, so they will have you can set up an account with them that has you can tell them when my Google account has been inactive for 3 months, 1 year, year and a half, you can set the time. Then please alert me and this other person and let us know that the account is inactive. That way they can be notified. Okay, you may have, I don't know about you, but I have a few Gmail accounts that I've set up over the years because I forgot the password to my other one. So I just set up another Gmail account. So if those accounts are inactive, they'll email or contact that person. Facebook also has a digital executor person that you can designate to be the contact person. You can choose to memorialize your account or to have it deleted. So if you're choosing to memorialize it, upon notification of your death, Facebook will just say, okay, they have chosen to memorialize their account. So we're going to just make this a memorial account so people can post something on your profile just saying, hey, thinking of you, or something like that. Sometimes people like to go there, or families go on there and make an announcement about something, a memorial service or something like that. Um, if you say delete it, then the legacy contact person can notify them of your death. They'll say, okay, do you want to download any of these photos that are on Facebook? you'll be able to download them, and then they'll delete the account. And now Microsoft offers a next of kin process. So they don't actually have you set up a digital account. They just have someone, a standard phone call. You get a call into the giant support line, and they'll work with the family if you have proper documentation like the death certificate, proof of your relationship with the person, or proof that you are the personal representative or trustee of the estate. So they will work with you on that. And most of these places, pretty much all of them, you at least need a death certificate or some sort of obituary or something like that to prove the passing of the person. Um, Yes, thank you, Kathy.
Absolutely.
So the big companies, the bank has procedures. Every bank has a different procedure. So you just need to call and check with them. Hopefully you have beneficiaries set up on your bank accounts. So that will make things a little bit easier. Crypto exchanges, that's probably a whole nother webinar. But I know that there's hot wallets and cold wallets, and it depends on how you hold them. And so that gets a little complicated. PayPal, Venmo, Apple Pay, they all have their own rules. Um, Usually, again, it's the same kind of thing. The executor or the personal representative of your estate lets them know that you've passed. They need to show proof of it, and then PayPal or Venmo, if you have a positive balance, they'll issue a refund to that person, or issue the check to them, or they'll put it directly into the bank account for the estate.
So
Um,
I'm sorry,
Go
Carol,
ahead.
let me interrupt, but one of the things with some of the banks too to remember, as well as like Venmo and PayPal, which may have positive balances in it. Like your Venmo account, you may have received payments and you didn't transfer it over to your account. You've just left it in your Venmo account. Oftentimes, if there are smaller amounts, like with banks, certain banks will say that values up to a certain amount, they would then go ahead and give to someone who can prove that they're next of kin or that they're the personal representative. They may not make you go through a full probate proceeding. Other banks might. They might say, I don't care if there was $1 in that account or if there was $10,000 in that account. We are not going to give it to anybody without legal authority to be able to do so. And that would involve a legal proceeding as probate to be able to get authority to be able to access the account. Carol talked about making sure there's beneficiaries on your accounts where you can. Absolutely perfect way to go. Another way is that if you can put the accounts into your trust, particularly things like investment accounts or checking accounts, savings accounts, they can actually be owned by a trust if you have one. And that's another way to make sure that then they are accessible by your successor trustee and they don't have to go through any like crazy wranglings to be able to get at the monies.
Right.
One thing about the cryptocurrency, they oftentimes again require, of course, proof of death and proof of authority to be able to access those accounts. But you also may need the login information for the account. So not only do you have to prove the person died and that you have the authority to be able to get at the account, but then you have to be able to get at the account. Now, I know Coinbase has a process that if you don't know the login, then you have to go through a specific process with Coinbase to be able to then figure out how to get into someone's account and to get authority to do that with them.
Right.
So we talked about like the Netflix, Spotify, usually those are subscription accounts, and usually it's just an ability to cancel them and be able to say, well, we're not paying for it anymore, canceling the credit card that might have supported those. But you have to know they exist. And so, that's important for us when we're putting together the listing of our digital lives, is really being able to include these kinds of assets too, so someone knows those accounts actually exist. Same thing with Amazon, eBay. Oftentimes, again, if you have a business through Amazon and eBay, you're going to be also dealing with accounts that may have value to them, whether it be the site itself having value or that there's money being held by Amazon or eBay with respect to the business that you ran. And so you want to make sure that there's clarity about the fact that you own those different assets and how someone then can deal with those assets. And I touched on the gaming accounts. They're not typical type of thing, but hard to believe. You now can create, I'm not a gamer, so I really don't have the knowledge base on this, but you can create these avatars. You can actually create these creatures, these people within a gaming structure. And believe it or not, there are certain gaming avatars that have value that can be sold. So if you are into those things, you have to make sure that your loved ones know about it in order to be able to preserve any value that might be there. Otherwise, it's just going to go away. So let's talk a little bit about what you can do now to begin to make it easier in the future. Um, so really you want to start small. And the first place I think people should begin is really looking at passwords and how you manage your passwords. Now, if you choose to, you can, go ahead and keep, whether it be a spreadsheet, whether it be something in writing, you certainly can utilize that as opposed to using some kind of an online password manager. But again, I just want you to be careful about security around that, making sure that the wrong people can't access it, but the right people can. So either utilize some kind of written format for your passwords that you know you can protect, or consider using some kind of a password manager. And then you need to make sure that whoever you do want to be able to access this has the master password to be able to get into it.
Yep. And I also want to point out for the Apple accounts, because a lot of us have Apple iPhones, um, you can set up more than one legacy contact. And each time you set that up, they assign an access key for that person. So once you have it all set up, then you can choose to how you tell that person that they have a legacy key. So it gets saved into your Apple account and you can send them a QR code that says, hey, I set you up. If something were to happen to me, you can get into my Apple account, but you need this key. So Apple will send them the key as well.
Right.
Um, I do want to address, there's a question in the chat box about purchasing the knock box, which is the next of kin box. I know that very well. I've heard of that. And that is a great route for organization. Of course, I think Full Circle Legacy is a fantastic way to organize that information as well. But the knockbox, in case somebody doesn't know, and then to tell you a little more about the legacy planning that we do at Full Circle, um, all of this information that we're talking about, getting this all together, it is overwhelming and it is a lot of stuff. So things like the knockbox and Full Circle Legacy, we can help you get that all in one place. That is really the key thing, is getting all this stuff that's scattered everywhere into one place. And there are things that you think, oh, I've got it all together. And then you think of something else and you're like, oh, I forgot about that too. So it's really a great way to keep information for anyone who may need to access it in your absence. It's also a great thing for you to access during your lifetime so that when something comes up, you can go into it and just say, oh, I know exactly where that information is. And it has to be updated. So you can't just do this knockbox or Full Circle Legacy, one time. You have to go back in it. If you change a password and you have your passwords written out there, you've got to go in and make sure that it's updated, because if someone goes in your absence and needs the password to something and you changed it 3 times since then, it's not going to do them any good. So that is the one thing about getting your stuff in order with the knockbox, is to make sure you update it.
Right. And we even recommend oftentimes, certainly with changing of passwords, that's something you need to do in real time when you've changed the password. But we recommend that at least annually. And I often think, a nice reminder is around tax time when you're already gathering a lot of information, gathering about your accounts, et cetera. It's a good time to take a look at what you have memorialized to say, is it up to date? And being able to use that as a good time to be able to make sure that you have captured all the different things you may have added or subtracted during the year. Certainly doing it as you do it is a great way to make sure you don't forget, but reminding yourself once a year to really sit down and take a look at this would be important, and updating that digital asset inventory that you put together. We were talking about just a real world example. you know, I remember when my mother had passed away, her recipe book, she had actually a little file box with little file cards of all her recipes. Well, I now have all my recipes online. So I actually have, either written them in and saved them as a document somewhere, or I've scanned in the older recipes and I now have them as a digital file. So even things like that we don't think about in terms of what might be of value to someone else. My kids would love to have some of the recipes that they've enjoyed throughout the years, and that might go away if someone doesn't know that I have that and how to access that. Our Apple accounts, our Google accounts, they include so much more than just maybe what's on our phones. With their backups now, with their iClouds, there's all kinds of documents that we keep. Things, past tax returns may be kept in one of your Google Drives or in an Apple. Documents that you have that are important with respect to maybe insurance policies, copies of your legal documents, et cetera, may be on some kind of a platform. So making sure that your loved ones know about that and know how to access it. One of the things to think about once you've started all of this, again, kind of put down for yourself, maybe within the next month, again, to keep going through this digital asset inventory and making sure that you're updating it and keeping it as current as possible. Start to research the different platforms, things that we either have talked about so you can get more information, or maybe you have accounts with places that we haven't discussed. Take a look at what their specific policies are. Most of the companies now are setting up legacy policies to talk about what happens after you've died, or if somehow you become incompetent or incapacitated and can't access your accounts yourself. How do you go about setting up someone from a legacy standpoint to be able to get in there and deal with them for you? And decide who you would really like to put as a digital executor, whether it's one person or whether you have multiple people for different types of accounts. But begin to think about who you want to give that authority, that really responsibility to, and talk with them about it. Because again, it's not going to do them any good if they don't know, number one, that you've asked them to do this, and number two, how to go about accessing things and what you have. So it's really important that you have conversations with them so that they can understand where they can access this information and what you're asking of them.
And then,
Go
oh,
ahead. Go
if
ahead,
I
Carol.
may,
No?
I see someone asked if I've heard of Legacy Shield. I have not, but I'm assuming it's something where you can share your digital legacy with family members. There's also other software places out there like Trustworthy. You can do that. If you are a Generations Law client care member, you'll have access to DocuBank. DocuBank can be a great resource as well because you have that safe, the online safe in DocuBank where you can put all of your documents. You could put a document that you keep your passwords on, you could put it up there. And in DocuBank, you can name a digital executor as well. And if you have any questions on how to do that, I'm more than happy to help you.
Absolutely. Go through your estate planning documents, sit down with your attorney and talk with them about making sure if you have specific digital assets, like let's say websites, et cetera, that you're concerned about, and you want to make sure that they are addressed in your documents. You want to make sure that it's clear who they're going to, let's say, or who has responsibility for them. And just make sure there's language in your powers of attorney. And if you've done with us, there is language in there talking about the digital world and and the fact that you've named somebody to be responsible for digital assets, online assets as well. Look at different secure storage solutions. As Carol said, there's many different options out there. You know, there used to be the commercial about I think was it Lifeline was the company for the longest time that had the ability. That's not the I've fallen and can't get up company. It's the ones that if you had your data breached, that they could help make sure. Well, there's many different companies out there. Make sure it's a reputable company. Again, you want to figure out, you want to see how they handle authentication for getting in to the account. And but find out what one is comfortable for you and see whether a digital ability to store your documents and your information is a way you want to go, as opposed to some kind of paper format for it. And write clear instructions for that digital executor. Again, once you've identified who that person is and you've had a chance to ask them and make sure they're willing to take on that responsibility, you want to be clear with them about what you have and how you access things. And then don't forget, as Carol said, this isn't a one and done situation. You've got to keep up with this information because it's going to change regularly for you. As companies make you update your passwords, we all know how many times our bank makes us update the password, or any of these larger companies. They're going to have a regular time frame that they want an update to happen, and you need to make sure your documentation reflects that. And make sure your digital executor knows any major changes that you may have had, whether it's assets that you've added or you've taken away. You know, you'd hate for someone who thinks you have coin-based or cryptocurrency-based programs out there and assets out there, but you decided to sell them and you no longer have them, and then something happens to you and someone's spending a lot of time and energy trying to find these things. So make sure that they also know when you have decided no longer to utilize a particular form of digital, whether it be an I account, an Instagram account, a Facebook account, whatever. Do that check at least once a year. Again, kind of like tax time when we change the batteries in our, what do they have? The 2 times we change time is when you change the batteries in your smoke detectors, et cetera. This is one of those things you want to put on a maintenance program too. Once a year, take a look at it. And stay up with things. You know, as Carol said, we're telling you now what we know about Google and Facebook and all of that, but they changed their policies. So take a look again annually just to see if there's something that's changed, if they've made it easier, or if somehow they've changed their program about how they're allowing access after someone has died.
Yep. There is a question if we can obtain a printed version of this presentation. Yes, we'll send you a PDF of this when we send you the link to the video. So everybody will get a printed version.
Wonderful. Some of the times when you really need more help than this presentation or even just trying to do it yourself, if you've got a business online, if you have an online business that's making real money, you need to sit down with someone and talk about it. That's a company. You need to make sure that that money, that value isn't lost upon your death, or if you're not able to manage it yourself. Same thing with cryptocurrency. As you all know who are involved in cryptocurrency, there's real value there. And if you can't access it, you can lose it. So that's something that you want to make sure is clear too. And if your situation is extremely complicated, like you do have foreign banks, foreign assets that need to be dealt with as well, those should be addressed separately. And then we wanted to give you kind of an overview of what to think about when choosing a digital executor. And it's really as important as when you're thinking about someone who might be the personal representative of your estate, or someone who might be your attorney in fact under your power of attorney. This person's got to be trustworthy. You're giving them the keys to the castle. And I mean that literally, because as you all know, accessing bank accounts, et cetera. If you're giving them the ability to access this information, you are really giving them a lot of of access to your life. So make sure it's somebody who's trustworthy and somebody who's got a little tech savvy. because getting onto these accounts, it's not easy for those of us who deal with it all the time, and it's changing all the time. So you want to make sure the person is also somewhat tech savvy. Understand the importance of cybersecurity. This person has to be very careful about what they're doing with the information. Again, the scamming out there, is just unbelievable, and how sophisticated scammers are becoming. You want someone who can act quickly, because sometimes, this information has to be accessed in a timely manner, or it can get lost, or the value can somehow be affected in it. And make sure that they want to do it. It's important that you've asked them. You don't just put someone's name down and not ask them, are you willing to do this? So just some things to think about again, that, taking care of your digital life isn't automatic. Family can be locked out. They might not be able to access the important things. So it's something that you need to think about ahead of time. The more planning that you do, the more that you're able to document regarding your digital life, the better it's going to be for them in terms of ease of access. Remember that every company is different and they don't necessarily make it easy. So do take a look at the different companies that you are utilizing and research what their legacy plan is. Start now, make it simple, but definitely start now. Do something to begin to memorialize all of this so it isn't lost. Um, and there can be things again in your digital life that you don't want to lose. You don't want them to lose. Family is going to be really upset if they can't access some of it. It's going to be a real loss for them. And so we want to think about that. Our digital life is important. Wonderful.
So thank you,
Thank you,
Thank you very
everybody.
everyone.
much. Thank
Hope
you.
this was helpful. You know where to find us, generationslawgroup.com, or give us a call, and we're more than happy to help you if you need any assistance. Take care,
Thank you all.
everybody.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.